Brad Holmes said the Lions have had dialogue with Jared Goff and his agent on a new contract and are in a good place with that. Ever since Jared Goff was traded to the Detroit Lions for Matthew Stafford along with a ton of draft picks, there has certainly been a ton of conversations revolving around Jared Goff. Is he the quarterback for the Lions? Will he be the future of the Lions? The recent conversation around Goff has been, should the Lions give him more money, extend his contract, is he the future, or is Hendon Hooker going to be the future of the Detroit Lions? Well, first off, to clear the air about Hendon Hooker, there is no chance Hendon Hooker will be starting at the beginning of the 2024 season. It's kind of funny, some Lions fans thinking just because the Lions drafted a quarterback means that he's going to be Goff's replacement. I like Hendon Hooker a lot. I think he was great at Tennessee. I've watched his tape. I think he has potential to be a starting quarterback for the Lions one day, but for now, he's just a backup. Many also seem to forget that he tore his ACL last November. That's not that long ago. And another thing Lions fans seem to forget is that they re-signed Nate Sudfeld on March 24th, not even 2 months ago. I believe Hendon Hooker was drafted because if Goff went down at some point during the season, Hendon Hooker would be able to come in and at the very least help the Lions compete to make it to the playoffs. Everyone saw the 49ers last season with all their quarterback injuries. If Goff would have went down and the Lions hadn't drafted Hendon Hooker, the Lions put Nate Sudfeld in, and the season's pretty much over. And I'm not saying Nate Sudfeld is bad, I'm saying Hendon Hooker would give the Lions a better chance at winning. Additionally, Hendon Hooker can play behind Goff, develop behind Goff, and maybe one day he'd take over for Goff, but that'd be far in the future. Looking at Jared Goff's contract, he's going to be making $27 million for each of the next 2 seasons, and then he would be an unsigned free agent. And for how Goff played last season throughout the second half of the year especially, he had a 15-0 touchdown to interception ratio for the last 9 games. $27 million is not a lot. And it's crazy to say $27 million is not a lot of money for Jared Goff to make. I mean, $27 million is a fuck ton of money. But that's the world we're living in. You saw Jalen Hurts' contract. Over the next 5 seasons, he's going to be making $51 million a year. So the Lions, they could give Jared Goff a pay bump for the next 2 seasons, or they could extend his contract. But it all depends. Does Brad Holmes and MCDC think Jared Goff is the future of the Detroit Lions? Do you think Jared Goff is going to be in Detroit for the next 4 seasons, and he's going to be the guy? If you've watched my videos before, you must know that I am a Goff believer. I love Jared Goff. When he first was traded, I had my doubts, but honestly, I shouldn't have had any doubts because I didn't really know what I was talking about. Goff's first season in Detroit was alright, but it made sense that he didn't do very well because the Lions were terrible. They were rebuilding from the horrific Quinn Trisha disaster. In the end, what the Lions end up doing is going to be solely based on, does Brad Holmes think Jared Goff could lead the Lions for the next 4 to 6 or more years? And I have a feeling he does. I think at the very least, Brad Holmes might give Jared Goff a pay bump. Another thing people forget, or they just didn't know, when Jared Goff was drafted number 1 overall to the LA Rams, or back then the St. Louis Rams, Brad Holmes was the scouting director for the Rams at that time. Snead was the GM for the Rams, and he's the one who actually drafted Goff number 1 overall, but Brad Holmes was asked for his input, and he said he liked Goff number 1 overall. He's not sure if his input held any value in Snead's decision, but Brad Holmes was with Goff all the way back to when he was drafted. And the thing we all know about Brad Holmes is he has an absolute gift for evaluating players. Even if this draft doesn't pan out, he's proved it with the last 2 drafts and players he brought in his evaluation on Goff. Who would have thought that Jared Goff would have had the season that he did? Nobody saw it coming. I really like this comment on what the Lions should do with Jared Goff, so shout out to this guy. This is truly the time and place to negotiate a deal for Goff. He's not elite by any means, but above average. You won't have to pay the max if it doesn't work out. There will be a team who's willing to trade for him, and a relatively reasonable contract. If the Lions were to wait till after the upcoming season to negotiate with Jared Goff, and next year Jared Goff plays like an MVP and has the most unbelievable season ever, there'd most likely be tons of teams looking to sign Jared Goff after the 2024 season. We already looked at Jared Goff's contract, $27 million. There'd definitely be a team looking for a quarterback that would love to pay well over $27 million for Jared Goff. As the poster said, if the Lions were to extend Jared Goff's contract now, if it didn't work out for some reason, Goff doesn't want to be in Detroit or whatever happens, I don't think it would end badly. The Lions would be able to trade Goff, and I'm sure that some teams would trade some pretty high draft picks for Goff, especially if he's playing at a high level. I think the big thing the Lions want to avoid is Goff playing like an elite QB over the next 2 seasons. His contract runs out, and then there's a standoff, and he's asking for $50 million a year. I don't think it would come to that because Brad Holmes seems pretty smart, and I don't think Goff would create some big public standoff with the Lions asking for money like Lamar Jackson or Aaron Rodgers. Goff is a stand-up guy, and I like him a lot. He seems to be a little bit more quiet, but he puts in the work and shows it on the field, and that's what I like. If you look at Daniel Jones's contract, he's definitely going to be in New York for at least 3 seasons. And the 4th season rolls around, there's only $9 million in dead cap. The Giants could very well cut him or trade him. The Lions could very well structure a contract like this for Goff, front load the money, as they have $19 million in cap space still. In my opinion, before the 2023 season starts, there will definitely be a restructured or extended contract for Jared Goff. My guess is 4 years. I read another comment that talked about the Lions don't restructure or extend Jared Goff's contract. It could be discouraging for Jared Goff, especially if he has a bad game. The media may blow it out of proportion, say put Hooker in, Hendon Hooker's the future of the Lions, etc. And I really believe that a deal like this might happen because Brad Holmes really likes Jared Goff. I personally really like Jared Goff. I know a lot of people don't believe in him for some reason, but Brad Holmes and MCDC have been saying Jared Goff is our guy for a while now. And before the draft, Brad Holmes came out and said that the QB depth was looking a little weak and they needed to add some players behind Goff, and he's come out and said after the draft that Goff is still our guy, and I've talked to Goff. Hooker is just a backup for now. And even if I'm wrong and Jared Goff doesn't end up getting extended before the upcoming season, it's good to start those conversations about negotiating the deal now, because if Jared Goff has another incredible season, he's going to be asking for even more money and it's going to be harder to negotiate. And some may say Jared Goff seems like a stand-up guy, which is true. I really like Jared Goff, which is also true for me. He'll probably take a little bit of a pay cut to stay with the Lions. Honestly, I'd like to believe it, but what player is going to take $10 million less to play for their favorite team? It's most likely not going to happen. $10 million is a ton of money. I mean, you'd love to think that Jared Goff would go, hey, I'm already stupid rich. I'll take a little bit of a pay cut. I already have more money than I know what to do with, know what to spend with. I'll take a little pay cut because I love playing in Detroit and I want to keep winning. Well, if another team's like, hey, I'll pay you $10 million more per year, you can make the same amount of money playing with us and I'll give you a golf course. I mean, it's so much money. In the end, I don't even know what I'm saying. I just don't think Jared Goff would really take a pay cut to stay in Detroit. As much as I'd love to think so, who's going to take a pay cut to stay with the team? Nobody. I mean, it's not really realistic that someone's going to take a substantial pay cut to stay with the team. Maybe $1 million or $500,000 if their deal's over $30 million, but it's not going to be very much. I mean, Jalen Hurts said he would take a pay cut, and he's making $51 million a year. Where's the pay cut? He would have made $51.5 per year. Nothing substantial. And back to Hendon Hooker, the only reason I would think Hendon Hooker would be a starter for the 2023 season or 2024 season for that matter would be Goff gets injured, Hendon Hooker comes in for a game, 2, maybe 3 games depending on how bad Goff's injury is, and he's playing like a prime Patrick Mahomes, one of the best quarterbacks you've ever seen. That's the only way I think Hendon Hooker comes in and takes Goff's job. But I see Hendon Hooker as more of a project quarterback. There's a lot of upside, but he could turn out just to be a bust. Why would you put Hendon Hooker in week 1 this upcoming season when you have Goff? And what if Hendon Hooker's just terrible? The people that think Hendon Hooker is Goff's replacement, I don't even know what to say to you. You're crazy. And Hendon Hooker, he's still recovering from his torn ACL. Is he even going to be ready to play the preseason at least? We don't even know. Also, just talking about all this money, I know I said it was crazy earlier, but just talking about how much money these quarterbacks are making and saying that's not that much, it's so funny to me. Jalen Hurts making $250 million over 5 years. It's bizarre. I feel like I'm talking in Succession. If you haven't watched that show, it's the best show of all time. And that's going to be the end of this video. If you enjoyed my content, I'd really appreciate if you could like and subscribe. It really helps me out a lot. And once again, as always, thanks for watching. Fuck the